Artificial intelligence is becoming more prevalent across businesses of all sizes. But how can middle market companies take advantage of these tools, and what considerations must they make when deciding on how, where, and when? Today, we talk with an expert specializing in technology implementation with advice on how to think about an approach to effectively using AI.
Welcome to The Market That Moves America, a podcast from the National Center for the Middle Market. The center is the leading source of knowledge, leadership, and innovative research on the middle market economy. Throughout our podcast, we will feature middle market leaders and stakeholders to hear their real-world perspectives on trends and emerging issues.
Welcome to The Market That Moves America. My name is Doug Farron, Managing Director of the National Center for the Middle Market, located at The Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. Well, in the last 2 years, there hasn't been a topic that's become more of a hot issue for really all of business, but particularly for middle market companies than the idea of artificial intelligence, AI. The center started tracking this issue a couple of years ago through our middle market indicator, and we've seen a very slow but consistent increase in the amount of mid-size companies that are both implementing AI in their companies as well as experimenting and testing and just really trying to understand where it fits best for them. In our podcast episode today, I will be talking with an expert, Stephanie Donahue from Avanade, who works on basically working with companies on IT consulting, workplace modernization, and so forth. So we'll learn a lot more about that. But first, I'd like to welcome Stephanie to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, Stephanie, could you start with just telling us a little bit about your background, your role today, kind of where you focus, and then maybe a little bit of background about Avanade too?
Sure. So I'm the practice leader of our modern workplace team in the US at Avanade. And if you're not familiar with who we are, Avanade is a joint venture company between Microsoft and Accenture. So we're solely focused on Microsoft-based consulting services. And, I think, Accenture is pretty well known for working with large enterprise. And so Avanade's kind of fallen along behind that traditionally, but we actually do work with the mid-market now. So that's a space that we're getting super comfortable in. Traditionally in modern workplace, if we dig into that another layer, we've thought about our work in terms of tools, Microsoft 365 administrators, Teams and SharePoint collaboration, forms and workflows, Power Platform, migration, identity work, that sort of thing. But now, we're working with M365 Copilot, agentic AI, as you mentioned, all the rage, all the hot topic, that's all come into the picture now. So we also have a big focus on helping organizations transform culture, process at work. We often think of M365 Copilot for personal productivity, but also, now it's about changing the way people work together as a team, as an organization, and completely rethinking business process as we move kind of into this agentic world. So that's a little bit about Avanade and what we do. I can tell you personally, my responsibilities include anything from people leadership to our go-to-market strategy, learning and development strategies. I'm sure you can imagine that's a big uplift right now. Keeping the whole team on the edge with AI and agents and endpoint modernization and things like that. It's our job to stay on the bleeding edge. So, but I'm also very hands-on with customers, especially their leadership teams as well. And I have a degree in computer science from The Ohio State University. So I've been in IT for 26 years now, 15 of that in the mid-market, and 8 years I ran my own consulting business, Microsoft consulting business, before coming to Avanade. So I've probably spent the last decade as a solution architect helping organizations modernize their digital workplace. Microsoft MVP, regional director, I'm just using every ounce of everything I've learned in the past to lead Avanade and our customers into the future of work.
Yeah, that's great. So workplace modernization, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but could you tell me a little bit more because I heard words like culture, hybrid workplace. So much has changed in the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm sure you're seeing this across all of your clients. But talk to us a little bit more about what that means, and like how do you dig in with these customers and really kind of tie all those pieces together, because that can be a huge challenge, particularly for mid-sized companies.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the definitions changed quite a bit just in recent days, right? When you say hybrid work, when we were back in the COVID timeframe, hybrid work meant maybe partially work from home, right? That's kind of where that got started, but also
Right.
now working in the office a little bit, and that's kind of what we've known to be hybrid. And what we're hearing from Microsoft now, they talk about this concept of being a frontier firm, and what that means is that we could have agent workforces, and that means that agents could be also teammates of ours. And so they're now part of that workforce, and hybrid could actually mean human and agentic employees, which is a really interesting concept, right? But
Right.
that's a huge transformation. It's a big jump from where we are today, and I think a lot for people to get their arms around. And that's why that culture piece of it is so important, because we look at what we know work to be today and what our culture is today, and that's a lot different. So this becomes not just about deploying a new product or deploying AI tools, but really figuring out how to align them with how people work. And that starting place needs to be just learning the foundational stuff, right? We don't need to jump into hybrid teams with agents. We just need to be learning about them. What is responsible AI, right? Not using personal chat GPT to enter your work data and your organization's intellectual property, right? Things like having a strong digital core and making sure that customers are, our organizations are doing due diligence on data governance, not oversharing from OneDrive, right? So starting from those small, what I call like baby steps, right? On just learning about AI, learning to be responsible and being careful with our data, and then kind of bringing that all around to what's the employee experience going to be with AI. And we always say there's shadow AI, right? So if you
Yeah.
don't start looking at this as an organization, your employees are going to start to use it on the side anyway. And wouldn't you rather be, from a foundational level, putting those things in front of them so they can be responsible with them?
In your experience, Stephanie, do you find that there are certain types of organizations, or maybe it's certain industries, where that mindset is a little bit more prevalent and it helps accelerate the change in the learning? Because I can think of
Yeah.
examples where there might be more resistance to maybe technological change, and maybe other organizations where it's like, hey, this is just how we
Yeah.
do things, and we're more open to continual learning and those type of things. I'd be curious to hear your experience.
And it kind of makes me laugh a little bit to answer this question, because I would have told you the opposite a few years ago. Because when it comes to our regulated industries, we look at healthcare, finance, right? We've had all these compliance and regulations to deal with, right? You have HIPAA on the healthcare side, and FINRA for finance, and they've traditionally been very conservative with bringing on new technology, because they have all of these checks and balances, right? They have to go through and make sure they're meeting policy. But what's interesting about AI, and specifically, I work a lot with M365 Copilot, is that it's actually been those industries that are leading the charge into AI. And it's simply because their data is ready. It's organized, it's protected, it's labeled, right? They've already had to go through all those checks and balances to make sure the data is ready, and this is just a layer on top of that data, that makes it easier to access that data. So it's almost been a flip, and we see those regulated industries pushing forward in a way that some of the others are struggling,
Mm,
because they've done that foundational work up front.
right. That does make sense now that you explain that way. We recently did a case study about a middle market company. They're actually a technology implementation partner, and they actually experimented over the last 18 months with Copilot, and then kind of took those internal learnings to become a better partner for their clients. And then generally, we've seen many instances where middle market companies particularly try to make the most out of these types of investments. So what would be kind of your point of view on how, particularly in the middle market, technology, whether it's AI or something else, how can those investments be maximized?
Mhm. And this answer is probably the same regardless of the size of the organization, but the timeframes might be different. With a really large organization, you have a lot of people you can throw at a project, right? And at the mid market, you probably have a person or two who's kind of a jack of all trades, right? They do a lot of different things. They have a lot of responsibilities, and so the timeframes for some of these things may be different as a smaller organization. But at the foundation, we always start with a strategic assessment, and that can be done with a partner or just internally. You just sit down and say, where is our business today, and where do we want to go? And if going back to that strong digital core conversation we just had, right? If you want to integrate AI, but that strong digital core is not there, let's not jump into AI too quickly. Let's go back and make sure that our data is protected, right? That we don't have those oversharing problems in OneDrive. But we may also be looking at things like, where is that data? Do we still have on-premises systems, right? That's not accessible to most AI in general, right? It's going to have to be cloud-based. So you really kind of have to sit down and say, are we already in the cloud? Is our data protected in the cloud? And then from there, once you kind of have those foundational items set, then you can start aligning to things like, what measurable outcomes do we want to have? Because you'll see people on two sides of the fence. Some organizations will want to have a strong ROI. They want to see that return on investment, and that's what's driving them. They want to see bottom line, they want to see the dollars come in, right? And sometimes that might mean full-time employee reduction, right? That's a pretty big conversation. But on the other side of the fence, we have organizations that won't even go there. We're not talking about eliminating employees for this. We're focused on the employee experience. We want them to get more out of their day. We want them focusing on the things that are important, that they're good at, right? You have really talented engineers who are doing manual processes. We want to make them more efficient so they can do the things that we need them to do with their engineering expertise, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to refocus them. So you really have to kind of understand who you are as an organization, where you're at foundationally from a tech perspective, and then what do we want to get out of it? What's the most important thing? And all of those things are going to help you drive what is that conversation that we need to be having? How fast do we need to move through this? And what types of use cases should we be looking for? And those are all things that you can do to really kind of expedite that experience and make sure that you're going to get the most out of your AI implementation.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next question for you, which was just beyond the tools themselves. You were starting to describe really the people aspect of this, the kind of the change management that goes along with it. I mean, it sounds like it's very much a unique situation from company to company, depending, some of those factors that you were talking about. But
Yes.
What are some of the things that, companies can think about when it comes to making sure that their employees are comfortable with this, that they feel fully empowered to use the tools to their maximum efficiency? Because like you said, you don't want to, they're probably going to do it off to the side anyway. They might be using it in their personal life, but now we're talking about integrating it into the workplace.
Yeah. And the most important thing that I think we need to emphasize is that it's more than just training, right? This is about building confidence and trust in the tool, in AI. And that doesn't happen overnight. And I often liken this to exercise, right? We think about, I want to start a new exercise plan. And when you start exercising, you're going to get on the treadmill, you're going to start lifting, and then you get on the scale the next day and you're like, I haven't lost any weight, or I'm not more muscular, right? You're like, why not? Because it's only been 24 hours. Your expectations may be too high. But when you integrate it in a daily basis, it's something you're intentional about. You make the time to go work out every single day. You add in things like eating healthy, right? And then you look back and in 3 months, you can see the progress, right? You can see how it's been intentionally worked in and that you're gaining results. And I very much look at AI the same way. This is not going to be overnight. We're talking about huge business transformational change. That is not something you're just going to implement this, do a single training session and see massive results, right? You've got to come back in and say, okay, we need change enablement, not training. And the employee experience, is based on how successful that enablement program is. So we look at things like office hours, holding promptathons where they, have intentional time to think about what problems are we trying to solve and how might we use AI to do that, right? Having a space like something like Viva Engage or Teams where they can connect with each other and help each other, and they're not just waiting on IT support, right? How can they connect and share stories and ideas? Having a center of excellence, things like that, where they have a place to go for what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? How do I get more training? Those sorts of things. So all of those kind of combined make up that change enablement program. And those are the things that are going to help you truly drive adoption in a way that just dropping someone into a training program is not. And again, it takes time. There's an article that talks about it's like 11 by 11, and it actually takes up to 11 weeks for an end user, an employee to start really gaining the value from a tool like Microsoft 365 Copilot. Because again, you're coming in and you're saying, how do I work differently today? And that takes practice and habit, because if I come in every morning and I'm manually scanning my emails to figure out what am I going to work on today, I should instead go to Copilot and say, what are the most important things in my inbox that I need to address?
Sure.
Very different mindset. We have people tell us they even put like sticky notes on their monitor, like remember to use Copilot, which is right. That's funny, but it's true, right? It takes that daily practice. It takes intentionality, and it takes change enablement programs over training, which is just very different than what we see traditionally with an IT rollout for a new product.
And I believe there are communities out there, right, where you can reach out to other users and ask questions. I mean, to your point, like some of the IT departments may be very resource constrained and they don't have time to answer every single question that's out there. But you can oftentimes learn from peers who are kind of tackling some of the same issues or have a question about like, hey, how did you best go about doing X, Y, and Z? Have you seen a lot of that too?
Oh, absolutely. And, I'd say if you're M365 Copilot, you could look at like Microsoft Tech Community would be one. That would be a place you can go. It's like forum based, basically, where you can post a question and get answers. And that's a whole community that can answer. You're not waiting on Microsoft there. It just happens to be Microsoft hosted. And then there's, I've seen things on Reddit. I've seen things on their Facebook groups, right? There's all kinds of stuff. If you just go search the web, maybe you could ask Copilot, right? That's actually one of the best tricks you can do. Ask ChatGPT or ask Copilot, like, help me make this prompt better. Or what kind of prompt would I need in order to do X, Y, Z? And it'll give it to you. It's the best training tool you've ever had in your life, because you don't have to go Google search, Bing search, whatever. It's actually going to bring you the answer back and then give you the references. So definitely use your AI to learn more about it.
Yep. You mentioned a little earlier privacy and security. So as we survey middle market companies regularly, some of the issues or challenges that they call out about AI, certainly like, hey, how do I implement it effectively? Where do I get started? Those types of things. But then very high on the list is they're concerned about privacy and security of data. So what are some of the recommendations you have to ensure that that is addressed and doesn't become a barrier necessarily to using all these great tools?
Yeah. And that's where using a trusted tool can be really helpful to the mid-market in comparison to, maybe creating your own, because we do have a lot of ability now to create our own from scratch. We can build everything custom if we want to. But when you use a trusted tool, and, clearly I have bias towards M365 Copilot since that's the space that I sit in. Then, it comes, I say, with an easy button, because in Microsoft's case, and I know this is the case in other enterprise tools as well, the bias mitigation is built in. The prompt injection protection is built in, right? In Copilot's case, it's using all of the existing security permissions that you have in place for Teams and SharePoint. It's using the existing sensitivity labels. There's no additional work needed, right? So that's something that you can come in and turn on and have those things already available to you. So I definitely recommend looking at something like a trusted tool if you're a smaller organization and you don't have have the people to build things from scratch and to do the testing and to build in the bias mitigation and those sorts of things, right? So, in the Microsoft space, we say that we have the policies available to create what I call a fenced-in backyard, right? Give them enough room to go and use Copilot, create agents, use the tools to be productive and not wait on IT. We don't want anybody running into the street, right? And that's what those policies are there for. You've got those safety mechanisms in place so that we don't have to worry. We know they're in a safe environment, and that, it's going to be pretty hard in order to break that and to do something that would get them in trouble. Microsoft has something called enterprise data protection. And what that means in short is that those foundational models aren't learning or improving from your organization's content or your prompts, right? So even when you query the web, your data is protected. And that's not always the case when you're creating things. You have to be very careful. If you just plug things into the public chat GPT, it's learning from you. And we need to remember that, right? So there are definitely some easy buttons if you're looking to get started quickly where those safety mechanisms are already in place.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up the discussion, I mean, we could go on for hours. I mean, this is just
I could talk for days.
This is it's so interesting because it's just so applicable and real time. But Stephanie, if you were to think about, this is changing so rapidly, but do your best to think about what the next couple of years, like 3 to 5 years, where do you think this is going? What are going to be some of the evolving trends, or where do you direct clients or, companies you work with to start thinking about, okay, in 2030, here's where this is going to be? I mean, I know it's pretty difficult to try to predict, but if you could, where do you see the modern workplace heading?
Yeah. 5 years feels really far away right now, doesn't it? When I think about our near future, it's really about building the foundation. And if I had one piece of advice, right, it's build your AI fluency now so you're ready to scale responsibly as this technology matures. And first and foremost, I think the now is that, we have agents and that are able to do specialized tasks, right? They're pretty independent. They're probably not in connection with other agents yet, unless you're really on the bleeding edge. You're just starting to embed these things into your daily workflows. Lots of proof of concepts going on right now. But what's coming in the near future is that we're going to see that transition to what we call multi-agentic systems, where you're going to have an agent that can call another agent to do a task for you, right? So let's say I'm going to have one agent go and do the research, and then I'll have a secondary agent who would then write the report up for me based on the research that the first agent pulled up. So we're going to have this chain of agents that are able to first maybe be kind of a one-by-one workflow, and then maybe eventually they'll be able to be smart enough to call themselves based on what the need is. And that, will come over time. I'm thinking that's probably, a year and a half out to where we'll see that more commonly. And then, 2 years plus, maybe that's really where we're going to have that agentic web. We're going to start seeing that shift into that frontier firm that I was referring to, where we start to see everyone's an agent boss. Maybe I have a team of agents that I use every day to get specific tasks done. And, I'm responsible for making sure that I'm the human in the loop for those agents, right? And that they're all working together. And that's a couple years out. It's really hard to go a couple, further than that right now. I think things are changing so incredibly fast. I think it's hard to imagine beyond that. And maybe my timeframes are shortened, right? I think maybe a couple years out, having that kind of functionality really feels like a push, because that requires that might be where the bleeding edge customers or the organizations are. But I think over those next additional 3 years, that'll be when it hits everyone else, right? I think it's going to take a while for people to get to that level of comfort and to be able to have the right technology expertise in-house to be able to move into that space.
Yeah, I don't know if this was an example that you had shared or I'd heard in a different session, but on a personal use case, if I were to have a scheduling agent who could then reach out to my doctor's office's agent, and they would just book my next wellness check. And it just gets on my calendar. Like those type of interactions seem to be that kind of the next wave.
Yeah, and I keep joking that I'm going to create an agent, and I'm half serious if I could find the time, but I just want to be able to label, if it comes in from my direct manager or my skip level manager, that it's an automatic accept regardless of what's on my calendar, right? The second tier is like if it's a customer meeting, it'll accept that and bump a lower tier meeting, and everything else that's internal is like that tier 3, and it'll make decisions on my meetings based on the tiering system in my calendar. I don't know. That's my dream world, my executive assistant agent. That's what I want to build.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been really, really interesting, and just love the conversation. So I appreciate your time, Stephanie, and thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a good time.
For more about Avanade, Stephanie's organization, you can visit their website, which is avanade.com, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Market That Moves America. Never miss a new episode by subscribing anywhere podcasts can be found. You can also subscribe to our email newsletter at middlemarketcenter.org.